Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. If the most valuable commodity in the world is attention, then influence is the measure of one's ability to successfully direct that attention towards a desired outcome. And as for entrepreneurs like us, well, there are two ways to tap into the power of influence. We can become the influencer in our own right, gathering and directing attention wherever we wish, or we can hire those with influence and pay a fee to tap into their stream of attention and credibility. Both are extremely powerful ways to build a business and sell products, but using them correctly is an art as much as it is a science. So today we're joined by Brittany Hennessey, the author of Influencer, Building Your Personal Brand in the Age of Social Media, to help us navigate the opportunities that are available to people on both sides of the fence. So Brittany's the former head of influencer marketing at Hearst Magazines, and today she's the co-founder of CarbonApp.io, which is a mobile application that matches destination companies like hotels with global influencers to create a win-win marketing opportunity. She's also the judge for the annual Shorty Awards, the largest award show in the world for companies and influencers who are pushing the boundaries of social media. So in today's interview, Brittany's going to provide you with an excellent lay of the land when it comes to tapping into the power of influence in social media. And she's also going to give you a handful of incredibly valuable resources that you can use to increase your personal influence or to connect with existing influencers that you could potentially hire or partner with. This is a fantastic interview that will provide you with an incredible amount of clarity on a marketing strategy that is as equally powerful as it is misunderstood. With that being said, please help me welcome Brittany Hennessey. Well, Brittany Hennessey, welcome to Self-Made Man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this interview for about 3 or 4 weeks now, and it's a real pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So you're known as one of the world's foremost authorities when it comes to influencer branding and marketing. You've got a best-selling book on the topic called Influencer, and this is a topic that we've maybe brushed indirectly on here on the show over the past couple of years, but we've never had an entire episode dedicated to this. So I'm super excited about it. I couldn't think of anybody better to have on the show to discuss this topic. But I would like to start with your story, as I always do, because I want to know how you got into this topic and became an authority on it.
Sure. So, like a lot of people in influencer marketing, when I was in college, this was not a thing. And so it's not a job that I prepared for. It's kind of a job that every opportunity just led me further and further down this road. And I majored in journalism. I wanted to write for a magazine. I wanted to be a feature writer for Rolling Stone. That was my goal. And, I also did a lot of work in PR and internships in PR because it's fun and there are lots of parties. But when I graduated, could not get a job in print because print was changing, could not get a job in digital because no one had figured that out yet. So I went into talent management and I was an assistant at an agency. And I did that for a while. And then while I was doing all of this, I had a blog that became really popular in New York City. It was a nightlife blog. And I was chosen to go to Germany with Nivea as an ambassador and hang out with Rihanna. And
Nice.
That was my first influencer marketing experience. And I was like, oh, this is a thing. Brands are paying for it. And, while I was there, all I needed to do was send out like a bunch of tweets. And so when I came back, I jumped from journalism heavily into social media. And I worked for Lucio Roberts, which was a women's gym, and used our members as influencers to promote the gym. And then someone I knew from my blogging days went to an agency and started the influencer marketing division there. That was like my first official influencer marketing job. And I did lots of television, lots of, CPGs, lots of mommy products and children's products. And I did everything from top to bottom, analytics, pitching. And I really liked the casting part because that was, my first job too out of college, working in casting. And then the job at Hearst opened up. And I got that job through a friend who I actually met on the Nivea trip. which is great. So lots of my experience in this has just been with dealing with the same people who are also coming up in the business. And then I did that job for 2 years. And while doing it, a lot of influencers kept asking me the same questions. And so that's what led me to write the book on how to be a better partner as an influencer. Because every book that comes out is written for brands, and no one was helping talent be better partners. And I was in a unique position to do that.
Nice. Could you define, influencer for us? Because it's a term that I think when people hear that, there's 2 or 3 different shades that they could put that in. So what's your definition?
Sure. I think an influencer is it's pretty cliche, but it's someone who has influence, because there are a lot of influencers who just have a lot of followers, but they can't actually convince their audience to do anything, right? Because they're not really an authority and their audience doesn't actually trust them. And so an influencer is someone who, is well versed in whatever the topic is. So if it's beauty or fashion or fitness or travel or, parenting, and when they tell you something is good and you should spend your money on it, you go spend your money on it. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're doing is pushing product. And it doesn't necessarily have to be because a brand has paid them to do it, but because their audience really enjoys their insights and trusts their authority. So you have to have that, or you're definitely not an influencer, no matter how many followers you have.
It's interesting. Like the example that comes to my mind is Julius Dean, right? So for those of you who don't know Julius, he came on to the social media scene about 3 years ago, doing street magic tricks, and has just blown up into millions and millions of followers on all of the different platforms. And he's an incredibly talented magician, but his content is 100% entertainment, and so he's not really an authority figure on anything outside of magic. So I think that that's probably a pretty good example that I can think of, where if he comes out and says, go buy something, I mean, it's definitely going to resonate because his audience is so big, but he's not an authority on anything specifically outside of magic.
Yeah. So it's, but that's something, if you were, a company in Las Vegas and you had a magic show and, maybe you like magic, but you are weary of like Las Vegas shows. But Julia said, no, if you like my style, you'll love this show.
Right.
That's a place where he's an authority in magic and niche. Things magical, so it's everybody's got their thing. And, I think part of what a lot of influencers run up against is because there's so many branding opportunities. A lot of them are lifestyle focused, because that means you can get compensation from a lot of different types of brands, but that also means you might not necessarily become an expert in any of them. So there is a trade-off, with a lot of influencers.
One of the questions that I've been debating for my own business here over, let's say, the last 6 months is, should I be branding and doing all of my social media work through the Self-Made Man accounts that we have, or through the Mike Dillard accounts that we have? And there's pros and cons to both. But if you're going to provide some advice to someone who's looking at dedicating the next 1 to 2 years of their lives to really put themselves in a position of authority and have influence, what's your feedback on the difference between doing it under your own personal name or a brand?
Sure. So I think the answer to that really depends on how intertwined is your brand with your personal life, because it can be very different. So I have my personal handle, which is Mrs. Brittany Hennessey, and it's all about, before I had the book, it was like my portfolio. It was all the influencer work I had done. And now it gives advice to people who want to be influencers. I could also have a handle for my book. I have like an influencer empowerment brand called like Duct Tape and a Dream. That also could have a handle. I could have all these handles, but then that also means I have to manage multiple handles. And it's hard enough to be consistent on one, let alone on 3. And then then your follower count also gets split between all of the handles, because you might have 3 handles that each have 3,000 followers. But if you would have had one, you'd probably have 10,000, and then you'd have, the elusive swipe up feature on Instagram stories. So I think, a good example of someone who has three handles and it makes sense, Jacqueline Johnson, who is the creator of Create and Cultivate, which is a brand for female entrepreneurs, and it lends itself to creators. She has Jacqueline Johnson, which is her life and her style. She has Create and Cultivate, which is for that brand. And she wrote a book and it's called Work Party. And that book also has a handle. But they're all different enough that the content can be spread out across three different accounts. And people might follow one account and not necessarily be interested in following the other one. So if you can make that distinction, I think it's okay to have multiple accounts. But based on the content being created, if somebody is likely to follow all of them, then you probably should just have one and do it under your personal name. And then just use the hashtag of your business.
Yeah, I would. That's the default. Looking back at what I've learned over the last couple of years of growing a brand, I'd always used Mike Dillard as my personal brand for the last 8-9 years. And then we launched Self-Made Man as a podcast in 2014, 2015. And the goal was to really build that up into the primary brand. And yet, I'm realizing I'm still at the center of influence for everything that happens underneath that brand. And the relationship that people have is still with me regardless of the logo. So,
right.
We have our Self-Made Man Instagram account that we pushed pretty hard for a while. And I've just been debating on whether or not I should close that and just put all of the activity under Mike Dillard. And this is something that I want everyone who's listening to this to think about, is if I were to continue to put all of my time and effort to building up the business Instagram account and that brand, then all of the audience and all of that relationship equity is with that specific brand account. Well, I don't know about you, but about every 5 or 6 years, I kind of get inspired to pursue something different. Maybe it's different content, start a different business, whatever it may be. But if all of our activity is under Self-Made Man and I am inspired to either sell the business or go do something different, then all of that is lost, basically. You're starting over from scratch, rather than if you do it under your own name, your audience will follow you through whatever you end up doing and wherever you go. So
absolutely.
Something to consider for folks. And then I wanted to touch on the content production piece. You mentioned that it's hard enough to produce consistent content for social media for one account, which I completely agree with. What resources or tips do you have for folks like myself who are doing a very poor job when it comes to consistently producing content? Brittany, I have hundreds of hours of video content and podcast content just sitting there that we don't utilize or push on social because I'm missing that person or agency or tool to do the lifting when it comes to editing and all of that stuff. What would you suggest for someone like myself in that position?
There are quite a few. I think one of the things that's really nice about, influencer marketing growing as quickly as it has is there are a lot more resources than there were because there are a lot of aspiring influencers. And so Canva is great for editing, to make a quote, to, put a nice overlay on something, to make a nice collage. That's great. Pixlr is great, and that's from Google. And then in terms of planning out content, it really is one of those things where you have to sit down and do 3 posts at a time. And for something like that, you'd use a Later or a Planoly or even a Buffer, because unless, if you're an influencer and that's your full-time job, they post on Instagram as with the same consistency as they brush their teeth because they have to. It is not something that's optional. It's something that's mandatory. And so, I think that's part of the mindset. And I always tell people, being an influencer is not just a thing or follower account. It's a lifestyle. And that's part of the lifestyle is you post on Instagram every single day. You answer your DMs religiously. You engage with the people who are commenting on your posts. These are things that are not optional.
And do you say not optional from not only, building a relationship standpoint and rapport, but from an algorithm standpoint? Is that why you're saying that?
Absolutely. Instagram rewards people who use Instagram. And if people are not interacting with your content, they figure, your audience isn't interested and it deprioritizes your content. And so the only way to get people to remember who you are, especially if they're following a lot of people, is to post on Instagram consistently and then also, do a lot of stories. And if you have some other platform, YouTubers are the same way. They have a schedule. People tend to build their lives around influencer content, which is funny, but true. If you come out with YouTube videos every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:00, at 7:01, if it is not live, your audience is already on Instagram asking you where the video is. Because they're waiting for it.
I'm totally guilty of that. A year or two ago, I would literally spend breakfast every morning with Casey Neistat. Like, Casey would post a YouTube video every morning, and that's what I watched when I'm eating breakfast in front of my computer every morning.
See?
And when there was no video posted, I'd be like, well, shit, now what am I going to do for the next 10 minutes? Yeah, I get it. Well, that's good to know. So there was a ton of tools that you just mentioned. We'll put links in the show notes, guys, to all of those tools and resources. I use Canva as well, which is a phenomenal photo editing software. And then we wanted to talk about, what are your predictions for 2019 when it comes to social media and influencer marketing? What's going to change and what isn't going to change?
So I think, influencers will still be creating a lot of great content and more content. So that's not going to change. You're not going to see fewer influencers. You're going to see more. They're just going to be everywhere. And this idea that like everyone's an influencer, yeah, it's pretty true. You can't really, especially in New York, you cannot walk down the street without bumping into someone who has 10,000 followers. Like, that's just the direction we're going in, because people spend a lot of time on social. So you'll definitely see more influencers. I think pricing will do two things. It will go up and it will go down. And so if, the influencers who are making a lot of money, like the top influencers, I think will make even more money, because they will start to develop and increase their influence offline, which that's, hosting events and, modeling and actual campaigns and being on TV and doing movies. And a lot of influencers who were funny online started doing comedy, and now they're doing, arenas. So you'll see them really start to expand their influence and command higher fees for it. And then because there are so many influencers available now, it's a much more competitive market. And so for everyone else, you might see prices decrease in terms of how much it costs to book an influencer and how much an influencer can make. But I think the biggest trend we'll definitely see is more video. So much more video. Instagram up until this point has been very photo oriented, and I think we'll see a big shift in 2019.
Specifically with their watch functionality, or in what way? Stories?
Facebook has decided it's going to be the YouTube killer. And so I think we're really going to see a lot of IGTV, because people are playing with it, but nobody's really figured it out. And people don't really have an incentive to figure it out because you can't monetize it yet. But that's coming. And as soon as it happens, there will be a real, if you already have built a huge YouTube presence, it will be, of course, very difficult for you to switch. But if you're just starting to get into video or realize that your audience likes video, why would you start a YouTube channel when you can start one on IGTV, which is where your audience already exists?
Well, yeah. If your audience is already there, and I'll play devil's advocate real quick on that, because one of our goals for next year was to go really heavy into YouTube. Mm-hmm. And IGTV, I've never once used, because it's kind of hard to find. I mean, I know where it is, but it's not in my feed and it's not in stories, and I have to go to like a whole separate part of the app to use it. So I just don't. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think if they bring that into the feed, that will really, really change things. So I hope that they do that. But the primary dissuader that I have against producing content specifically for Facebook or Instagram is the fact that it's not searchable. YouTube content has such a long tail. I posted 5 videos 3 years ago that still get, tens of thousands of views a month. And that's phenomenal, which you just don't have that ability in Facebook or Instagram. So do you think that they're going to address that, or is it going to be this 24 hours, it's there, it's gone consumption model still?
I think they'll address it. I think definitely bringing it into the feed. Even if you're on Instagram now, the app is a little different, where on the top right there's a little IGTV button with a red light. So that wasn't there a few days ago. It's next to the DM button. So they're already starting to slowly tweak the app. And if you look on the Explore tab, almost all of it is IGTV. So that's how people are going to get found. They're starting to do the tweaks. And, they have an advantage that YouTube didn't have and will never have, which is I watch a YouTube video and, I used to share it to Facebook and then people would see it. Facebook has deprioritized YouTube. So even if you share a YouTube, nobody will ever see it.
Right,
so you're, it's not something you do, and you don't tag people on YouTube. Like, I don't know anybody's YouTube username. I don't comment on a YouTube video. I watch it and then I move on. But if there's a video on Facebook or Instagram that I watch, I immediately start tagging people in it. Like, did you see this? And on Facebook, you like it, you share it, you comment. There's all of these actions that happen after you've watched a video that help people grow. And on YouTube, the hardest thing is not is your video searchable, can people find your video, but can you grow your audience? And it's hard because there's no native way to share content within YouTube. And that's not true on Instagram or Facebook.
Right. Yeah, interesting developments for sure. I wanted to ask you for your advice when it comes to, let's say, hiring an influencer, right, for a promoted post of some kind. Something that I've thought about doing. I've never done it. What would be the approach to actually go through that process?
So I think the first thing is to make sure your brand is ready to work with influencers. And I like to, compare it to having a party. You can want to have a party all you want, but if you don't have furniture and you don't have heat and it's the middle of winter, or you don't have food or drinks, you cannot have a party, no matter how bad you want to. And so, part of what an influencer will do is bring traffic back to whatever platform you're promoting. So if an influencer tags you in a post and then their audience goes to your profile and it's terrible, that's not a good look for the influencer. So making sure your digital house is in order before you decide to work with someone, and really understanding, like, who are you trying to reach? Because that will help you determine an influencer. And the influencer doesn't necessarily need to be who you're trying to reach, because there are plenty of influencers who are 35, but their audience is 17 because of the content they create. Or, they are super aspirational and have tons of expensive clothing and bags and shoes, but no one who follows them has any money. So not only do you have to know what you want the influencer to look like, but you have to figure out who are you trying to reach and can that person help you reach them? And then the third thing is figuring out, what do you want them to say? Because lots of times people will reach out to influencers and say, I want to partner with you. And the influencer will say, okay, what do you want to do? And then the person doesn't know. So what is the goal? Do you want people to visit a certain page? Do you want people to follow you on Instagram? Do you want people to watch a video that you have on your feed? You have to know what you want the influencer to do. And then I guess the last thing is, what's in it for the influencer? Because they know what's in it for you, exposure. What are you going to give them? And sometimes it's money, but there are plenty of things influencers want and need that aren't monetary compensation, because first and foremost, they have to be cool. And if they're not cool, then they're not really influencers. So that can be getting something first, having something that's really exclusive or hard to get, or just doing something really fun and exciting.
Is the best way to do your research and identify these potential partners on a few specific platforms that allow you to do that? Because I know that some exist, but I haven't used them yet. But is that the best approach?
Platforms, they're interesting because, one, they're so expensive. It's hard to find one that isn't six figures for a year. And two, lots of them claim to do a lot of things that they can't do. So I would say if you want to work with influencers, it's the best thing to do is to start following them. Follow a bunch of people who you like and you'd want to work with. If you like them, see who they're following, because it'll probably be other people that you also would be on brand for. And just watch their content, because and go through their feed. That's how you'll learn. Are they funny? Are they snarky? Do they love to eat? Are they dancers? Like, you'll learn everything you want to know about them, because their entire business is putting their life on the internet. And so that's really how you'll know who's the best person, because you can't just go by follower count or engagement. And it's hard to search for something if you don't really know what you're looking for. So I would just start following a bunch of different people. And then it's just like watching videos on YouTube. You start following one person and then, you always end up in like some weird corner of the internet. The same thing happens when you follow influencers. Then you're following some person and you don't know how you got there, but you'll have a really good idea of who's out there and what their interests are.
And what's the best angle to approach the subject matter with that person? Because I've got plenty of people who are always hitting me up for stuff, and not necessarily, JVs on social media, because our presence on social media is not massive, but maybe they want me to promote their product via email to our audience there, which is pretty big. And to me, it's just an instant turnoff. Here's a stranger who wants something from me to pitch to my audience, right? So
right.
How do you do that?
So I think it really comes back to knowing about the influencer. So if there is an influencer, who just if you're pushing home products and there's an influencer who she's looking for a home, you started off with, I know you just purchased a home, congratulations. Like, you've got to do that work. Or if they just got married or had a baby, or, if you're a company for delivering pizza, you can say, I know pepperoni pizza is your favorite. These are things to show them that you didn't just do some random search, find them, and you're just emailing everybody under the sun. You actually know who they are and what they like. And so now they're listening, because they're like, oh, this person knows about me. Because you'd be surprised. I mean, you probably wouldn't be surprised, but so many influencers get emails and it's not even addressed to them. It's like a different person.
Copy and pasted, maybe where the name has changed. Yeah.
And where it'll say like, oh, we love that you posted about X, Y, and Z. And the influencer's like, that was not me. So, you got to be mindful.
Now, how do you approach the negotiation process of the pricing, and 2, making sure that you're able to measure the results, right? Your ROI.
So I think the first thing is remembering that the influencer, if they're talking to you and you've gotten to the point where you're even negotiating the terms of the deal, they want to make this work. And so it's figuring out, what can I give you that, you'll be happy with and I'll be happy with. So it's thinking about money. It's thinking about, do you have access to something that they like, or can you get something that they want? And it's being realistic. Like, if you want someone who has 1 million followers and you're going to give her, $200 worth of product, she definitely can buy $200 worth of product herself. And so that's not what she wants. And I think that's really where people go wrong. They'll say like, oh, well, I don't have any money. Then you probably can't go after a person who has 1 million followers, unless it's like the story of your product hits so close to home for them that they would be honored to do it, right. Which happens sometimes, that does happen. And so if you can do that, fantastic. If not, it makes more sense to be more realistic about the type of people you can have access to. But it's great because now, they're influencers with 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 followers, and they're much more likely to do something where maybe they have a little bit of creative direction of what you're creating. Like, if you have a jewelry line, maybe you let them make a piece of jewelry using your method, and then they can sell it and get some of the profits. Like, you have to figure out what you're going to give them. It doesn't always have to be money, but it has to be useful. And then that's what you have to figure out. That's what takes them the longest amount of time in influencer marketing, is figuring out like, what is the trade? And then there was a second part to your question.
Yeah, basically just tracking, hey, what were the results, right? Was this a win-win for both of us, or did it not work out? Obviously, that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, I think, the first one is actually knowing what the goal is, because sometimes people just want to do something great and then nothing happens. And it's like, what did you think was going to happen? And they're like, I don't know. So you have to know what it is. So do you want people to watch a video? Then, your goal will be, well, when you post this video, how many people watch it? And when the influencer posts the video, how many people watched it? You would hope it's a big jump. So that will help you. And also figuring out, equating it to media value. Like if an influencer posts something and it gets 100,000 likes, how much would it have cost you to buy an ad to get 100,000 likes? Right. There's, it's a little different, because seeing an advertisement from a brand is definitely not the same as hearing it from an influencer, but it'll give you a starting point of how much this is worth. And so, but you definitely have to know, what are you trying to do first? Like if you want people to click a link, it's probably not best to do like an Instagram post. They're not clickable with an influencer. That's not going to be, she can't do the click the link in my bio. Nobody does that. Right. So if you want to drive people to a site, your best bet is to find an influencer who's really good at Instagram stories, who has at least 10,000 followers, and asking her to do a story with a swipe up. Then your metric becomes, well, how many people swiped up on this?
Right.
So you have to really figure out, what are you trying to do? And then find an influencer who can tell your story and include the call to action that will give you the metric you want.
Yeah, it makes total sense. What other changes do you see coming here for 2019?
I think this will be the first year that we have a more efficient market. Right now, and my husband talks about this all the time because his background is in business and forecasting trends. And he says, right now, people are really making the most amount of money because it's inefficient, which is true. There are tons of redundancies, but there are also so many business transactions that cannot be done just because of the way the industry is set up. There are influencers who want to do campaigns, but their agents are not telling them about it. And, there are influencers who would do a program with a brand for free because they love the brand, but, somebody else thinks they need X amount of money. It's just, there's just a lot. There's so much happening, and a lot of it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's hard to get in contact with an influencer. Even at Hearst, when I would be emailing influencers telling them I have $50,000 for them to do 8 hours of work, and there's no email address. I send them a DM. They'll never see it because they're getting DMs from hundreds of people a day. You send them an email, they're getting thousands of emails a day, so they don't see it. It's hard to even get a hold of them. So I think, Instagram is really starting to, particularly in fashion and beauty, that's Instagram really is, the bread and butter. But they're actually going to roll out creator profiles, which now we have business pages. You'll have creator pages. And I think some people already have them, and it'll have different metrics, and it's a profile layout designed for an influencer. And so that will be really interesting to see. But I think they're finally starting to prioritize them.
Do you know if switching your Instagram profile account from a personal account to a business account has an effect on your reach?
I would guess that it makes your reach go down.
Yeah,
but
that's
only
what I'm
temporarily.
guessing too. Okay.
Because if you're a business, businesses have advertising dollars. And so if you have advertising dollars and I suppress your reach, you will pay me for people to see your content, which I think is, Facebook. It's the model. Yeah. Everyone always says, like, how come Instagram doesn't create a platform for brands to connect with influencers? And I'm like, the thing you have to remember first and foremost is that Facebook sells advertising. That's what they sell. So everything they do will be to sell more advertising. So, but it comes with a lot of benefits. You'll be able to see your analytics. And that's really, if you're in business, you need analytics, and you can't get them unless you're a business page. But I think it only suffers for a short amount of time, because then it just becomes, if you create great content and people engage with it, you'll come up in their feed. So you might take a temporary hit. So if you're going to do it, I would do it at a point where you take a hit anyway. Like during the holidays is a perfect time, because nobody's on Instagram. everybody's engagement takes a dive in this window. So this would be a good window to do it.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. I think the same thing happened with Facebook fan pages years ago, where, we all built up these fan pages, yeah, and then they took away the reach and forced you to boost your post.
So people who you already worked to get to follow you could see it. Yeah, it was terrible.
and that's what I'm sitting here wondering. Okay, are they going to do the same thing with Instagram now? So I've kept my personal Instagram as a personal page, just because I'm afraid that the moment I switch it to business, they're going to drop the reach and they're going to, do the same thing. So that's why I was wondering. Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's
possible. But if you're creating good content, just how you go to somebody's YouTube page to check it out, people will come to your Instagram page to see what you're doing. So it really just means you have to work a little harder in making sure your content is good. But that's what you're supposed to be doing anyway. So then you just get rewarded for doing the right thing.
Right. Man, this is such a big topic. When it comes back to the content creation piece, I want to ask you one more question around that real quick. If you want to outsource that process, I've really seen kind of two models where it's like you can go find someone who has the technical video and photo editing skills to make your content, let's say overseas, for less money on something, like Odesk or, Fiverr or something like that. Or you can go to an agency here in the US, which is going to be significantly more expensive. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts around that?
When you're creating content is really difficult. It's the hardest. That's why I think influencers should get so much credit, because this is what they do all day, every day. Dealing with a social agency is expensive, and you're really paying for like the rent of their building and people's health insurance. And there are lots of people who can create that content for you at a much cheaper rate, like a Fiverr. But then, there are drawbacks to that, which is you're not sure about the quality you're going to get. But I think it's okay to outsource, just to make sure you do like the legwork. A great way to do that, this is a different way to use an influencer, is to hire an influencer to create your content. Their most expensive piece is posting it. But in terms of content creation, you could send them your product if you like their style and say, can you shoot X amount of photos for me, lifestyle photos, and then just give them to me and pay for those. And then you're not paying the really big fee, which is for them to post the content. So I think that's really influencers are underused for that purpose. Definitely underused, because they're much more affordable than a social agency or creative agency, and they're much more reliable than random people on the internet.
I assume if you approach an influencer for a deal in the conversations moving forward, that it's expected and normal part of the business arrangement that they're going to give you access, or at least screenshots, to their numbers and analytics.
Yeah, I think if a brand is smart enough to ask for that, plenty of brands, it depends on what you need them for. If you're hiring them for creative purposes, then those sorts of things don't matter, because as long as they give you the content you're expecting, that's what you're paying them for. If you're using an influencer as a distribution method,
right,
then that's definitely something you need, because you need to know who's going to see it. Are these the right people? And so influencers who have a business page have access to those numbers. And if an influencer doesn't want to give you them, do not work with that person, because something is not right there.
Now, I want to ask you one more question around this. Where a big part of the influencer model is getting that coveted blue badge, right? The verification badge that is a bit frustrating, because there's no straightforward qualification set. You're kind of at the whim of whoever is making that decision around your account at the time. What advice would you have when it comes to getting verified on these different platforms?
It's annoying, because I would also like to be verified. I'm not, thanks Instagram. But I think it's really one of those things that there was a wave where they were letting anybody be verified, and that was really the time to get it. I think, part of the verification, the real meaning of the verification is so that people know it's you and not an imposter. And so their whole thought process is, if no one's pretending to be you, then we don't need to tell people you are the real you,
Right.
And so that's really what it's for. It's for brands, because you see on Facebook all the time, people make these parody accounts and they're responding to people in the comments and people think it's the real brand. It's like, no, the real brand has a blue check mark. So, it's for brands, it's for celebrities. Influencers managed to get it because some of them were very early in realizing, like, I should get this thing. And then for a very long time, people were buying them. There was a black market for verification. So a lot of people you see who have it, who you don't think deserve it, probably purchased it, which isn't the best thing, because if Instagram ever, figures out how that was happening, they can take away all those people's checks. And now you went from being verified to not, which will tell us a lot about who you are and your influence. But, one of the main things they want you to have a lot of press, because that shows that you're a valuable person. And so if you really want to be verified, your best bet is to get a lot of press hits. That's really what they're looking for. And then ask. And then, of course, journalists get verified. So if you really, really, really need it, it would be wise to find like a publication that will give you a column or something like that. And then you can apply on the basis that you're a writer. Because almost all my friends who are verified and not bona fide influencers, they all work for some sort of outlet.
Right. Right. I mean, that's what I've heard from a few friends, is the fastest way and most reliable way to get verified is to write a book, get it up on Amazon, do some promotion for it so that it becomes a bestseller in your little category, which is really effortless to get an Amazon bestseller badge, at least in your first day or two usually. Then that's usually all that it takes. If you send that into Facebook and Instagram, they'll be very likely to give you the badge at that point. But that's just advice that's been passed on to me from people who've done it that way. Have you ever, and this is just a completely random question for you, have you thought about taking your skill set, your knowledge base, your book, and applying it to the very relevant but very scary social scoring system that's being rolled out in China these days?
Oh, like in what is it?
The TV show Black something,
Mirror.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, so it's interesting. It's super scary, but there was that episode that really was like that, and your score determined what car you could get and if you could be first in line. It's scary, but at the same time, I kind of like it. It's one of those things that if used properly can be very beneficial. It's only terrible when bad people get a hold of it, because then you have to start worrying about, like, is the government going to use it against you? Is free speech going to be limited because you're afraid to say something because you don't want your score to be docked? Like, that's where it starts to get scary. But I think, just in terms of strictly, figuring out how to interact with people and brands, it's not something I dislike, because think about it this way. If there's a store that you go into every single day, and it could be Starbucks, it could be your gas station, it could be, if you travel a lot, it's an airport. Wouldn't it be nice when you walked in that automatically they knew you were someone who frequented this place, and so they should treat you well? Like, that's why we have loyalty systems. You get points, but it only works if you have signed up for something, signed up for the Starbucks program, or signed up for, like Walgreens credits, and then you have to have your card every time you're doing it. Like, it's a lot of work, and it only applies to things like getting like free coffee, which is great. But it would be nice if that also meant you didn't have to wait in line. It would be nice if that also meant, when you order something, you automatically get the fastest version or the nicest version. So I don't hate it. Or even when you're tweeting a brand because something is, you had a bad experience. If you have a lot of followers, they respond faster than if you don't.
Sure.
And so brands are leaning into it. I don't mind it. I think that's also because my score would be really high. So I think if I was going to have a low score, I'd be less likely to be into it. But I'm into like the Internet of Things and like a hyper connected world. And people are like, my ads are so personal. Like, are they listening to me? And I'm like, well, would you rather have ads that aren't relevant to your life? Like, if I'm saying I wonder where I can get paint for this wall, and like my phone sends me like a paint article, I'm like, yes, this is what I was looking for. So it's creepy, but I kind of like it.
Well, just, you know,
I don't want it to get too scary, but I like the benefits. I absolutely think the benefits would be amazing. It's just the consequences that are really scary.
yeah. I watched a video on it yesterday, which definitely scared the crud out of me. But, you know, some poor guy missed paying his bill or something, and then he was prevented from buying plane tickets and then train tickets, and he was forced to like ride in a 6-hour bus to get back to his house. So
right.
Like the consequences were huge. But I'm just thinking, as a marketer, I'm thinking for you, if I was in the influencer industry, basically trying to just turn their entire population into a gamified, you know, influence, you know, deal. So I'd be jumping over there and establishing myself as an authority figure for sure in that country. If you were in this, because it's going to be a whole new world there in the next 2 to 3 years once they've got it completely rolled out.
I know it's scary. I mean, the worst part, if it was something that was rolling out in the US, it'd be different because we don't suppress things like that. But it's a country that has a lot of suppression. So it's tough to think like this is how they're going to allow your kids to go to school and which job you're going to be able to get. It's like, you know, you're not allowed to speak out against the government there. So then it really becomes like they, with a click of a button, can ruin your whole life, which that's what makes it really scary, because it goes beyond fun little things like getting a cup of coffee. You know, you're like talking about like where you can work, which is how you earn your living. So I'm fine with it as long as it stays in like the gamification of nonsense things.
Right.
But I don't want it to apply to anything.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm glad I don't live in China right now.
Yeah.
Well, Brittany, this has been a really fascinating conversation about a topic that I'm always eager to learn more about. And obviously, this is the world that you play in all the time. Where can people go to connect with you, learn from you, work with you? Obviously, we've got the book, Influencer, available on Amazon. But where should they go elsewhere to connect?
So I'm at Mrs. Brittany Hennessey on Instagram, and I post a lot of fun stories and good tips on being a better influencer. And then my website is BrittanyHennessey.com, and that's where you can book a coaching session with me if you're an influencer or a business, and also where I announce my conferences that are live, but also live streamed, where we bring in experts and you can learn all about the industry.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your education and your knowledge on this topic. It's something that our audience is definitely into. So I really do appreciate it. And this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I listen to this podcast all the time, so it was definitely an honor to be on it.
Oh, that's awesome. I had no idea, but that really that means a lot. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, guys, make sure you connect with Brittany. And as always, if you found this episode useful, which I'm sure you did, please share it with your friends. That's the way that the only way that we really grow this audience is by word of mouth. So I appreciate that very much. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Got me staring at you, so I'm crazy. Why you bend that back for me? We won't stop, got your feet both locked. You get to fly with me. I can take you down for a ride. Take you around my life. Jaywalking, crosswalking, lip locking, but